When people talk about the great disasters of Roman history, the ambush in the Teutoburg forest always comes up as one of the most heartbreaking, dramatic, and downright shocking moments the empire ever faced. 3 entire legions vanished in the rain-soaked woods of Germania, crushed under a trap so perfect that it stunned both historians and ordinary people for centuries. But something we don't talk about enough is what came after that horrific defeat. What Rome did next, how the survivors reacted, and how the empire tried to claw back its honor after being humiliated in front of the entire frontier. The moment the trapped Roman soldiers who managed to break free stumbled out of the forest, mud-covered, traumatized, and barely alive, the rest of the Roman forces guarding the Rhine could hardly believe what they were seeing. These were not the confident, disciplined legionaries who had marched proudly into Germania. These were broken men, and as their shattered accounts spread, riders were immediately sent racing toward Rome with an awful message. Couriers could cover that distance in about 2 weeks. But even before the official report reached the capital, something else arrived, something that caused even more panic than the news of the lost legions. The severed head of Varus, the Roman commander destroyed in the ambush, was sent by the Germanic tribes as a grotesque gift to Rome. That single object did more to shock the Roman people than any rumor. For many in the city, this wasn't just a military defeat. It felt like a warning, a prediction of doom. Parents whispered that a massive barbarian army was now marching straight toward Rome, ready to burn the city to the ground. Now the more level-headed citizens understood that a huge invasion, storming all the way to Rome itself, wasn't realistic. But the fear wasn't totally irrational. Every time Rome suffered a major wound, its enemies smelled blood. Opportunistic tribes might raid the frontier. Local uprisings might explode. And the memory of the recent Illyrian revolt, where nearly 1 million rebels had gathered right on Rome's doorstep, was still fresh. That revolt had been so massive, it required one of the most extreme military mobilizations in Roman history just to crush it. And now, just when Rome was finally catching its breath from that chaos, the Teutoburg disaster landed like a thunderbolt. It's no wonder the normally calm and emotionless Emperor Augustus began to unravel. According to the historian Suetonius, Augustus was so devastated that for months he refused to cut his beard or hair. He would walk through the palace, hitting his head against the wall and crying out, "Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." This was an emperor on the brink. But even in the midst of that emotional collapse, he knew the empire had no time to waste. Rome had to stabilize the frontier, reassure its people, and prepare for the worst. So the first step was immediate defense. Augustus ordered extra guards throughout the city, expanded the powers of provincial governors, and accelerated military recruitment. Meanwhile, across the Rhine, Arminius, the mastermind of the ambush, was already planning his next moves. He and his allied tribes understood that Rome was stunned, and if they wanted to maintain that temporary advantage, they had to act fast. They launched attacks across the region, overrunning small Roman outposts or raiding settlements, and wiping out any remaining Roman presence east of the Rhine. Only one major fortress managed to hold out for a while. The Germanic warriors tried to storm it over and over, but suffered heavy losses. So they switched tactics and settled in for a siege, hoping to starve the defenders inside. But during one violent thunderstorm, the desperate Roman garrison made a daring nighttime escape, slipping past the besiegers and reaching the Rhine. The last Roman stronghold in Germania fell soon after, plundered and abandoned. But when the Germanic coalition tried to push farther toward the Rhine frontier itself, they ran into a problem. Rome was no longer panicked, it was reorganizing. Reinforcements were already in place. The river crossings were fortified, and any hopes of a massive invasion died right there. This forced Arminius and his allies to rethink their plans. Instead of pushing into Roman territory, they pulled back, preparing for the eventual Roman retaliation. And that retreat, ironically, was the beginning of the end for their unity. Before Teutoburg, the Germanic tribes rarely cooperated, but the opportunity to strike Rome had briefly united them. Once Rome recovered, old rivalries returned. Even Arminius' former allies began to turn on him. His own cousin and rival Segestes broke away and formed a pro-Roman faction, Maroboduus. King of the Marcomanni, a powerful figure whom Arminius desperately needed, refused to join him, seeing little chance of surviving a full Roman counterattack. Once Rome regained control of its emotions, it was ready for revenge. But who would lead the response? Augustus knew there was only one man he trusted to restore order, his adoptive son and most capable general, When Tiberius arrived on the frontier, he didn't rush into Germania blindly. His first priority was to stop the bleeding. The destruction of 3 legions had left a massive hole in Rome's defenses, and Arminius was actively trying to widen it. To stabilize the situation, Tiberius brought in 8 legions, an enormous force, and secured the Rhine line. Once he was confident that the frontier was safe, he shifted gears from defensive to offensive. There's an old saying that the best defense is a good offense, and nowhere was that more true than on Rome's borders. So Tiberius sent a message the Germanic tribes would never forget. He launched brutal retaliatory raids across the Rhine. Entire villages were burned, fields and harvests were destroyed. Anything that could sustain a Germanic war effort was wiped out. Roman sources even claim that Tiberius executed these raids so flawlessly that he didn't lose a single soldier. Whether or not that's an exaggeration, the message was clear: Rome could still be terrifying. But despite 2 years of steady progress, Arminius himself remained untouched. The leaders who had crushed Varus were still alive, and while Tiberius had rebuilt Rome's confidence, he wasn't the one who would deliver the final blow. In the year 12 AD, Augustus, now 73, and in failing health, ordered Tiberius to return to Rome. The empire needed a smooth transition of power, and the heir had to be at Augustus's side. Upon his return, Tiberius celebrated a grand triumph. And shortly after Augustus died, Tiberius was now emperor of a massive empire stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the Red Sea. And with the weight of ruling the entire Roman world on his shoulders, he had no time to personally manage the revenge campaign in Germania. That responsibility would fall to someone else, someone younger, ambitious, and exceptionally talented, a 29-year-old commander named Germanicus. Germanicus wasn't just some random young commander thrown into the chaos. His very name carried weight. Germanicus had originally been an honorary title given to his father, but history would soon prove that the son was far more deserving of it. While Roman troops on the Rhine had clawed back some dignity through brutal retaliation, everyone knew the real goal was still out there: Arminius, the man who orchestrated the Teutoburg ambush, the man who humiliated Rome, the man whose very name had become a symbol of defiance against the empire. Germanicus understood what was at stake. This wasn't about expanding borders anymore. It was about Roman pride, Roman vengeance, and restoring a sense of invincibility after one of the greatest shocks in Roman military history. When news spread among the Germanic tribes that a new Roman commander was coming, and that he was bringing the full force of Rome with him, the victory glow from Teutoburg began to fade. Their attacks had slowed. Their temporary unity was breaking apart, and now on top of internal squabbles. They knew that Germanicus was coming for them. The year was 15 AD when Germanicus launched his campaign. His first major target was the tribe of the Chatti, one of the key supporters of Arminius. He marched across the Rhine with overwhelming strength, crushing resistance as he advanced. Skirmishes erupted in forests, marshes, and narrow trails, but Germanicus pushed forward relentlessly. This wasn't just a military operation, it was psychological warfare. Every village destroyed, every fortress stormed. Every path cleared was a reminder to the Germans that Rome wasn't done yet. But there was an even deeper reason for Germanicus to push further east. He wanted to march through the Teutoburg forest itself, the place where the legions of Varus had been annihilated, the place where thousands of Roman soldiers had died in terror, the place that had haunted Rome for half a generation. And when Germanicus and his men finally entered that cursed forest, the scene gutted them emotionally. They found battlefield debris scattered everywhere, broken weapons, rusted armor, splintered shields. But even worse, they discovered human bones, thousands of them, scattered across the forest floor, piled in heaps, mixed with mud and leaves. Roman soldiers, their own countrymen, had never been buried. Some had clearly been executed after the battle, their bones showing signs of ritual mutilation or sacrifice. Others had died still wearing scraps of their armor. The sight was devastating. Roman legionaries were not used to this level of desecration. Their culture honored the dead. Their military buried the fallen with respect. But here, they were looking at an unmarked graveyard spread across an entire forest. It was said that Germanicus himself helped bury the bones, personally gathering the remains of fallen soldiers, unable to leave them exposed any longer. The legions worked in silence. No speeches, no shouting. Just the sound of shovels, picks, and hands moving earth. This was more than logistics, it was closure. And as if fate wanted to add a glimmer of hope to that moment, The Romans also recovered one of their most sacred symbols, the lost eagle standard of the annihilated 19th Legion. Losing a legionary eagle was the ultimate shame. Recovering it was a spiritual victory, one that signaled Rome was finally balancing the scales. But Arminius wasn't going to let Germanicus walk through Germania unchallenged. He harassed the Roman columns' orchestrated ambushes and used the terrain to slow their advance. The Germans excelled in guerrilla tactics. They knew every river bend, every hidden trail, every patch of swamp that could swallow a Roman soldier whole, and for a while they stayed elusive. They refused open battle. They attacked from the shadows and then disappeared. But Germanicus had studied them. He learned their patterns. And as the campaign continued, he pushed them harder and harder until he finally cornered Arminius and forced him into something he desperately wanted to avoid: a pitched, open field battle. That confrontation would later become legendary, known as the Battle of the Edistaviso. Here, the Roman war machine unleashed its full power. Germanicus strategically positioned his forces along the Weser River, forcing the Germanic tribes into a disadvantageous position. Arminius fought fiercely, rallying his warriors again and again. But Roman discipline was relentless. Cohort after cohort pushed forward like a moving wall of iron. The auxiliaries flanked. The cavalry harassed the Germanic rear, and the legions kept advancing inch by inch. By the end of the battle, the Germanic coalition was shattered. Arminius himself was wounded. His uncle Ingiomer, another major leader, was also badly injured. For the first time since Teutoburg, Rome had not only survived a major confrontation in Germania, they had won decisively. The psychological impact was enormous. Rome's honor, which had been buried in the Teutoburg forest along with its fallen soldiers, was finally resurfacing. And Germanicus, young and charismatic, became the hero Rome desperately needed. But the war wasn't over. Germanicus continued campaigning, pushing deeper into enemy territory, burning through Germanic lands, scattering tribes, and reclaiming Roman prestige step by step. Yet at the peak of his success, something unexpected happened. Tiberius recalled him to Rome. Some historians argue that Tiberius feared Germanicus' rising popularity. Others believe he saw the Germanic frontier as a bottomless pit, a place where Rome could waste endless lives and resources without ever establishing stable control. Whether out of caution, jealousy, or strategic thinking, Tiberius ordered Germanicus home. And when Germanicus returned, he was welcomed like a superstar. Rome celebrated him with a massive triumph filled with cheering crowds, floral garlands, and the sounds of trumpets echoing through the streets. The humiliation of Teutoburg no longer defined Rome. The empire had reclaimed its pride. The eagles were recovered, the legions were avenged, the frontier was secure, and Rome once again projected the image of an unstoppable, unbreakable superpower. With Germanicus' triumph, Rome finally felt like the dark cloud of Teutoburg had lifted. After years of mourning fear, political tension, and shattered confidence, the empire could breathe again. But the story didn't end with celebrations in the streets. The aftermath of the Germanicus campaigns reshaped both Roman and Germanic history in ways people often overlook. For Rome, the victory wasn't simply about revenge, it was about restoring the psychological armor that had cracked so violently after the ambush. Teutoburg had shown that Rome wasn't invincible. It had revealed that even the strongest empire on earth could be blindsided, humiliated, and beaten. That kind of shock leaves scars. For years, Roman citizens had whispered, "If 3 legions can disappear in a forest, what else can happen? Who's safe? What if the barbarians march all the way to Rome?" But after Germanicus returned, those whispers faded. The empire had answered its critics. It had punished the tribes. It had retrieved its sacred standards, and most importantly, it proved that Rome still had leaders capable of responding to a crisis with overwhelming force. That symbolic recovery mattered more than territorial gains ever could. However, for the Germanic tribes, the post-Teutoburg era was far less triumphant. The unity that Arminius had forged during the ambush evaporated quickly. Old rivalries resurfaced. Tribal politics splintered, and Arminius himself, once hailed as the savior of Germania, slowly watched his authority crumble. As Roman pressure increased, internal conflicts grew. Some chieftains resented how much control Arminius had gained. Others worried that provoking Rome further would lead to the annihilation of entire tribes. Segestes, Arminius's own relative and long-standing rival, openly sided with Rome. Merobaudius, the powerful king of the Marcomanni, refused to join him at all. Even within Arminius' inner circle, suspicion and resentment festered. Eventually, Arminius' own people turned against him. In a twist that feels almost Shakespearean, the man who defeated Rome was murdered not by foreign enemies, but by members of his own tribe. His vision of a unified Germania died with him. And despite being remembered as a hero in modern German nationalism centuries later, his actual political legacy at the time was one of fragmentation. Meanwhile, the Roman frontier stabilized under Tiberius. It's easy to assume that after Germanicus's victories, Rome would press deeper into Germania to reclaim lost territory. But that's not what happened. Tiberius made a strategic decision that historians still debate today. Instead of pouring more soldiers' gold and decades into conquering lands that offered little economic value and enormous military risk, he drew a line. The Rhine River would remain the permanent frontier. Rome had regained its dignity, and that was enough. In a way, Tiberius understood something Augustus had struggled to accept: Germania was unconquerable in the long term. Its tribes fought with the kind of ferocity that came from defending their home soil. The land itself, full of endless forests, swamps, unpredictable weather, and narrow passes, was perfectly suited for ambushes. Even if Rome captured territory, it could never hold it comfortably. The Teutoburg disaster had taught Rome a painful but important lesson: not every region was meant to be part of the empire. And so, after all the bloodshed, Rome chose consolidation over expansion. Germanicus went on to serve in the eastern provinces until his career was tragically cut short. At just 33 years old, he died under suspicious circumstances in Syria. Many Romans believed he had been poisoned by political enemies. His death turned him into a martyr, a symbol of what Rome had lost: a brilliant young general whose potential was never fully realized. He became one of the most beloved figures of his generation, remembered as a heroic avenger of Teutoburg and a champion of Roman virtue. But even without further campaigns, his work in Germania had already left a permanent mark. The legions had been avenged, the shame had been washed away, and the empire's psychological balance had been restored. As for the Teutoburg forest itself, it remained a haunting memory for generations. Roman authors referenced it with fear, awe, and grief. The forest became a symbol of both Rome's vulnerability and its ability to rebuild after catastrophe. For the Germanic peoples, it served as a reminder of their most stunning victory, followed by years of internal collapse. And for historians today, it stands as one of the most dramatic turning points in ancient European history. The battle didn't just cost Rome 3 legions, it shaped the future borders of Europe. Germania would remain beyond Roman control. The Rhine would become a cultural divide for centuries, and the tribes that lived beyond it would eventually evolve into kingdoms that shaped medieval Europe. But from a YouTube storytelling perspective, what makes this saga so compelling is how human it is. Teutoburg wasn't just a clash of armies, it was a clash of pride, identity, ambition, betrayal, trauma, and determination. Augustus's heartbreak, Tiberius' cold strategy, Germanicus' fiery courage, Arminius' rise and tragic fall, the legions' suffering and redemption. These are the elements that make history feel alive because they reflect emotions we still understand today: fear, hope, loyalty, revenge, honor, loss, and the desire to rise again after being broken. In the end, Rome emerged from the Teutoburg disaster not just with military victories, but with a renewed sense of purpose. It learned its limits, but it also rediscovered its strength. And the legacy of that recovery, the way Rome refused to crumble after one of the worst defeats in its history, is perhaps the most Roman thing of all.